So recording has started, and we will now start admitting people.
Scotland. The SNP is a formidable campaigning force when it is in top gear.
Good morning, Philip. Good morning, Matthew. Good morning, James.
Good morning.
Welcome. Morning, Henry. Good morning, Don. Morning, Simon. If you've just joined us, if you could mute, please, that would be fantastic. Just hearing the radio news about the SNP conference, which is great. So Nicola Sturgeon's there, so it should be good fun. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Morning, Kevin. Morning, Sarah. And admitting more people. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Polly. If you've just joined, if you could mute, please, just to cut out some background noise, that would be excellent. Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Morning, Pension Playpen. Morning, Justin. Morning, Alan. Carl, if you could mute, and Justin, if you could mute, that would be great. And we'll just see if there's a few. Isabel, if you could mute, please, as well, that'd be great. Appreciate everybody joining this morning. Let's bring David in. Morning, David. Thank you for muting everybody. Right, okay. So Philip, it's now 10:32. Welcome everybody to this week's Coffee Morning Pension Playpen. I'm Steve Goddard, as many of you will know, and CEO of Pension Playpen. I'll be hosting the session with and operating it with Philip from Guide. So I really appreciate everybody joining this morning. And if you want to ask Philip a question, please raise a hand using the raise hand at the top next to React, all the people in the Teams meeting. Just raise a hand and we'll bring you in. We love interaction. We want you to love Philip and hate Philip and anywhere in between. Question him and make your point. And we want to be challenging our industry. So the session is also being recorded. So can we have a thumbs up, everybody, that we're being recorded, and everybody's pleased that we're being recorded. There's a few more admitting now. Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Mohsin. If you could mute, please, that'd be great if you've just joined. Morning, Gareth. If you could mute as well, that'd be great. Okay, so this session is being recorded, and we're delighted to introduce co-founder of Guide, Philip Hodges, who's going to be presenting this morning. And we'll open up the chat room as well. So if you want to make any comments in the chat, fine. But as you know, myself, and I think Henry may be on as well, but myself and Henry Tapper will be trying to encourage people to interact and engage with the session. So without any further ado, Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Right, so first off, I need to share. So hopefully, right. So it should be a slide saying there isn't a guidance advice gap at the top. Steve, give me a thumbs up.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much for everybody for joining this morning. I'm very proudly also joined by my esteemed business partner, Kevin Hollister, so you'll see him on the list somewhere. Kevin's here to pick up all the difficult questions. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin hasn't had the opportunity to see these slides, so this is as fresh for him as it is for you. So I put this up as being there isn't a guidance advice gap, just to be a little bit controversial. I have got a few slides to go through on the theme. And whilst I've got everybody's attention with that, well, some people's attention with that, the other way to view this is that what I'm saying is it is possible to give personalized guidance up to the advice boundary. I just think that as an industry, we just aren't really stretching our thinking enough, and it's all possible to do, whilst a lot of people actually call out and say, no, regulation needs changing. So now it's people here who are going to be asking the questions, but throughout this, the questions I'd like to ask of the audience and probably get some of the discussion going later is that my view is that scheme sponsors, trustees and providers stay very, very firmly within the bounds of their fiduciary duties. And I don't believe that is actually in the best interest of members and consumers. I'm basically saying is that I think the industry needs to do more and do better. So after we've been through this or through it, is that I'm going to be interested to hear from people about, well, should and can trustees, scheme sponsors and providers go beyond their fiduciary duties? What prevents them from doing so? And there is actually, I think, DWP consultation out at the moment about what scheme sponsors should be doing, trustees should be doing. There's talk about a default retirement solution or default retirement option. I'm also interested in hearing views about that. What should that look like? Okay, so not to be answered now, but have a think about those as we go through. So my starting point is that I did a post on LinkedIn last week, putting forward this issue that I thought the industry could and should do better. And I prompted it a bit then by using the analogy that if the so-called pensions industry was in the business of teaching people how to drive, okay? And some of the points I put on that post is that, and thinking specifically about guidance, is that a lot of what we see in the industry, coming from the industry in terms of guidance, is at such a level of detail so that the sponsor feels that they've covered all angles given to them in the regulations. And what tends to happen is that there's an attempt by the industry to educate the individuals in the language of the industry. And the trouble is that that doesn't work for people. It's not helpful. And I'll give you the classic situation is that just a lot of what I'm going to be doing is talking about, you know, coming up to retirement and pension freedoms. There's a classic thing is that what we tend to do is that when people are looking to take income, we present them with three doors. One says cash, one says annuities, and one says drawdown. And yes, you can mix those doors together. The trouble with that is that people don't understand what those products are, and we're not talking in their language. And if it's not trying to actually then explain to people the intricacies of retirement income, the other thing that the industry tends to do is actually pull back from that completely and just actually put it at such a high level, again with the fear that like going into any detail might trip over a regulatory barrier, doing it at such a high level that people don't really feel equipped to go and drive themselves. They've got a little bit of a feeling for it, but they don't feel equipped themselves. Now, I use those illustrations. Just be clear, I'm talking about guidance. I'm not talking about communication or education. There is some brilliant stuff done out there. We, for example, are not communication experts, and we love working with people like Quiet Room, who have actually helped us out in terms of our own comms. So I'm focusing my discussion here on guidance. Okay. And let me give you some other very specific examples. I'm a bit concerned. I'm freezing at the moment. I hope it's okay. Somebody will shout if you can't hear me or see me. Some examples. There are some very large and complex DB schemes out there. I can think of 3 examples where the explanation of the benefits of those DB schemes is beautifully done and beautifully presented. So the options that a member has in taking their benefits, absolutely fantastic the way they're done. But it doesn't equip people to drive, because it doesn't put those benefits in the context of their overall retirement and the sources of everything they've got to put towards their retirement. So my view is that you can't do personalized guidance without knowing all the sources that people have got to put towards their retirement. And what I mean by that is like state pension, DB, DC, non-pension savings, other sources of cash, other sources of income, be that part-time work or, for those fortunate enough, rental, whatever. Okay, so that's my my view and conjecture, and I will obviously be saying that because that's exactly what we do with Guide. And I am going to be using Guide as a model and an example for this, because I do feel that we've actually, particularly Kevin's genius, we've been able to really sort of stretch our thinking to give personalized guidance that doesn't cross line. Key core to that is factoring all sources of income and assets that people have to put towards their retirement. We know this works. Here's the evidence. And sorry, just the point here in the middle of this, what Guide is doing is helping somebody answer the question, the very specific question: how can I use what I've got to get what I need in retirement? Okay, that's what we're doing on Guide. We know these are the evidential points. We know this works. We know because 40% we have our own consumer site. 40% of our traffic comes via Google. We know in terms of what people are searching for, there are over 100,000 people per month who are looking for the sort of help that we give on Guide. So they're searching for this sort of guidance. That's point number one. Point number two, on our consumer side, we do quite a bit of work in terms of surveying and polling people who come to see us. We get over 10,000 people a month. 80% of the people who come and experience Guide say they come because the support from their employer or from their provider is lacking. So they're not getting that help elsewhere, 80% of people, okay? Granted, that's not necessarily the entire population. That's 80% of visitors to Guide. It's a pretty decent representation. We also know this works because people volunteer their reviews on Trustpilot for Guide. They will actually use the word love it, okay? They absolutely love what we do. So again, we know this works. And then on the right-hand side, I want to bring attention to some of the engagement we do with people. We would say, just like, again, another proof point, people are highly engaged with the personalized guidance we deliver to them. And on the right-hand side, there are a couple of an example that I'm going to give to support those 2 points you can see on the right-hand side. Recently, we introduced the modelling of annuities onto Guide. I know some people might say, just like, well, crikey, didn't you do that years ago? We did do it years ago. We actually took it out initially because it confused people, would you believe? We've now found a way to bring it in that it does keep people engaged. And firstly, in terms of that engagement, we regularly do marketing campaigns, and we have a very large registered user base on which to actually get responses. The open rate for our marketing campaigns is around 50%, and then we get 10% click rate for what we're doing. I mentioned that in the context of annuities, because before we brought annuity modelling back onto Guide, we actually tested the appetite and how people would use it. One of the key things we got from that is that in the allocation of assets to annuities, because it's not thinking about black or white, full annuitization. In the allocation of assets, we identified that probably the median, the most popular was to use 25% of assets to buy an annuity. Broadly, people were thinking about their own fixed cost. So the first thing we did was actually make the modeling to just say, okay, you can actually have a sustainable retirement plan if you were to allocate 25% of your assets to an annuity. This is what it looks like. Okay, so no complicated modeling, just straight up. That's what it looks like. We then do provide people with access to those who want to like dig into it deeper, they can do so. But the other point, before we actually just introduced that, we did actually fully provide the modeling. We measured reaction and behavior to that modeling before we fully came out with how we wanted to design annuity modeling on Guide. So it's evidential on the right hand side. The level of engagement we get from people allows us to actually evolve and put more things into Guide and keep the engagement, the superior engagement with them. This is another picture taken from the post that I did last week, because what informs us from the things we've done in Guide, thinking of driving, was pretty much that people just want to get somewhere and they would rather have an autonomous vehicle to do it for them. For the population, large population, that's what they want. And it's something that actually guides us as a principle in providing that sort of capability in terms of guidance. The two principles are, one, don't make me think. And there are a lot of things we do to make sure we help people not to think. And the second thing is do it for me. I don't have time at the moment. I'm quite happy to take questions about, what does that actually mean? But that's the kind of principles that we actually use, and I feel it's quite similar to what people are getting from an autonomous vehicle. Again, driving analogy that I put on the post is to say, just like people want a vehicle that gives them a dashboard and controls that they can easily understand. And this is something we are accustomed. I mean, it's pretty much expected these days, just in terms of like mapping capabilities and GPS within cars. Things that actually show us the best route to our destination and the objective we're trying to achieve, with optional routes, should we so wish to have a different journey, and options should we be anticipating risks. Now, the other thing we also now get from electric cars and the kind of like the guidance systems in those, because we're all accustomed now to mapping, but with electric cars and the guidance systems, you will have more in the way of actually controls and guidance and dashboards that actually mean things like reducing range anxiety, i.e. running out of battery, collision avoidance, and all things to help make the journey more and more comfortable. Again, that's something I posted on LinkedIn. We're actually taking those sort of things into Guide, because I think, again, that's what we're doing with Guide, is the fuel, so to speak, is all those sources of income and assets that can be put towards retirement. The journey is the cash flow plan that's generated. We have what are known as stress tests or scenarios that would help somebody identify potential accident spots. And then we have a range of controls and help facilities. So again, we're taking very much our steer from what people want in terms of autonomous vehicles. Another one is sort of like now helping understand about the push to the boundary of guidance. Something we introduced at the beginning of this year. It was called Guide Auto. Now, Guide Auto is an integrated guidance with a product that will allow somebody to fully electronically and automatically onboard to a chosen product. Now, that goes as far, it's not just about having a collection of personal details and actually, you know, pre-filled forms. It's more than that. It will stretch as far as taking a benefit or a cash flow that's generated in Guide and fully setting that up within the product. So in other words, where somebody is actually in their plan has decided to take the 25% tax-free cash, and where they're saying just like, well, cash flow indicates I want to take this amount of money per month. That's the piece that we've automated between guidance and the product. Okay. Now, I raise this because when we actually created this, we did find ourselves in one major challenge, is that on that step, we could not help somebody make an investment choice because that would be crossing the regulatory boundary. We took an easy decision on that. We basically only gave them one investment choice, which was basically a multi-asset fund for somebody going to draw down. Therefore, when they were selecting that within Guide, it was a choice for the product, not the investment fund. If they didn't think the product was right, they could go elsewhere. They could even look at annuities or whatever, but it was a choice of that product. Once they moved into a fully regulated environment, because we're an unregulated entity, then they could actually explore alternative investment options. But we help them on that journey from guidance into product. It doesn't stop there, because Guide is a real-time updated plan. So it means that somebody can actually withdraw money, watch how investment flows perform, and still within Guide know whether or not they've got a sustainable retirement plan. Okay, so that's one example where we did have to stretch our own thinking in saying, well, how can we actually help people through this journey without crossing over a boundary, but make it as simple as possible for them. We're going to go a step further than that. In 2024, I just mentioned in Guide Auto, it basically goes into a single multi-asset fund. In 2024, we will be launching a product with a partner where the investment strategy will be also fully automated and will be dynamically responsive to the cash flow. Again, we're not going to be going into detail of that at the moment, but it does mean for an individual, they don't have to think about the investments. It's done. One point to make here, I already made the point earlier on that we also model annuities. This is not an exclusive path for an individual. They can make use of annuities still to hedge against their drawdown plan. And also we will be introducing equity release as a retirement option as well. I've got a slide on that because even we're finding some challenges around that border and that boundary. And I'd be really pleased to sort of share that in a second. Right, so sorry, just be clear. One of the things we don't want to be is seen as being anti-advice. We do actually have IFAs who will be using Guide themselves. And I think there is still, even if you've had an autonomous vehicle, there might be a role that you want an advisor to play, whether it's as a coach to give you encouragement, a chauffeur to actually take all the burdens away from you, even opening the door, or as a scout to actually look ahead for you. And just to validate what I'm saying there, we do signpost IFAs from Guide, from our consumer site. We even have our own IFA panel. Equity release. Okay, this is going to be the last slide. Everybody's being very patient at the moment. This is going to be the last slide. We are still in the middle of exploring how equity release can play the best part in somebody's retirement. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to actually raise even a challenge that we faced. In the top right here, this is a cash flow. This is somebody who's 73, their life expectancy goes through to 87. They got 50,000 of savings left. They got state pension. What it shows here is that basically they will start running out of money around about 70, 77. So the red there is a shortfall against their income requirements. Now, the bottom right is actually effectively modeling equity release, where the individual has got a drawdown plan for 100,000 of equity, taken broadly at about 20,000 a year. And what it shows here between these, it's showing here that here's a cash flow that will last them through to their end of their current life expectancy. Brilliant. Okay. What's even better is if you can see the little grey bars at the top, in this earlier phase where I'm taking in pension drawdown, I'm paying about £3,000 a year in tax. Here, because the earlier years are a mixed balance between an equity loan and savings, I'm actually paying almost no tax at all. So there is a significant saving there. The problem with this is that an advisor could not recommend this plan on the right here, because regulation dictates that I have to be a pension pauper before I can actually go to the equity in my property. So basically, take strictly the regulation, it would say I need to bring forward all of these pension withdrawals, pay even greater tax on it before I can then use equity release in those later years. That is a real stretch at the moment. That's something, we've got some other ways we can feel that we can actually introduce equity release, but this would be our ideal. Regulation prohibits that at the moment. So I've come to the end to make the point that I think there are a lot that the industry can actually do to stretch and do more for members and consumers, to give them guidance that will help them find their best member option, the best option. Equity release, it's one that I think the regulator does need to take a look at. Okay, everybody's been very, very patient. Steve, you decided not to cut across me. And Kevin is ready to take any questions.
Yeah, and Kevin, if you could sort of unmute, that'd be good, and decloak, that'd be great. Even so, thanks for that. Thanks for the presentation, Phil. As I said earlier, if you want to make a point or ask a question, then please do. I know we've got a number of specialists on here. Billy Burrows is here, for example, who's very well known guru in the retirement market. Billy, I don't know if you've got any questions or whether you think this is the correct route or is it a cul-de-sac. We've also got a question from Gareth, but Gareth, let's do you first, then maybe Billy will come in a bit later, and then we'll bring in Kevin. But yeah, Gareth, if you want to unmute and ask your question or make your point.
Yeah, more of a point, I guess. Hopefully I haven't managed to unmute. Yeah, I mean, this is an area that has kind of been worrying me for a long time, from probably a bit of a different angle. I come, as some of you probably know, from an advice services background, sort of not financial advice, but generalist, and particularly kind of benefits advice for low income people. And one of the things that has happened very clearly in the last 5 years or so is that a lot of advice services, citizens advice bureaus and many others, have stopped giving advice about financial situations because very broadly they say, no, that's too dangerous. It's regulated. Financial advice is something we cannot deal with. You can't talk to people about things like pensions. And partially that's because they are frightened by the regulatory issues. But it's also, I think, because they're very clearly and self-knowingly inexpert in the area. It's a complex area, and they don't know how it works. But there is a keenness to learn more. In fact, yesterday we launched, in association with the National Association of Welfare Rights Advisors, some one-day courses on pensions, tax and benefits. And we've already sold out the first 5 days of those courses and had requests this morning for another 3 days. So clearly there's a demand from people to learn more about how it works. And from my perspective, it's not an issue of regulatory concern as long as you stay away from products. You can do very personalized assessments of the impacts of different kinds of pension schemes on your tax and your benefits entitlements. And that's what's really useful, because the potential difference between, for example, a kind of a regular income, be it an annuity or a plus or drawdown or whatever, and irregular drawdown can be enormous for people who've got means tested benefits, because basically one of them can be ignored, one of them's taken into account. So it's really important from that side to get people to recognize that there is not this ban on providing financial advice. There's a ban on providing kind of product-based advice. And if you can provide stuff which is agnostic as to the products, you can produce stuff which is really useful to people.
Gareth, would you be agreeing with the statement that I've made at the top, that trustees, scheme sponsors and providers should be going beyond their fiduciary duties and providing more personalised guidance for members and consumers?
I'm not, I have to admit, not my area, clear exactly what their fiduciary duties are, but certainly I think people should go as far as they can in providing this kind of information to people about the implications as well as the possibilities.
Gareth, I gave the example where there's some DB schemes, beautiful stuff they do about the DB benefits themselves, do not do anything in terms of helping people understand their choices in the context of their overall retirement. And I'm really keen to hear from anyone who actually who views that say, well, no, schemes shouldn't be going outside and trying to do more for members. They should just keep to a certain focus, and that's fine. I'm really interested to hear the views of that. I think it's not really doing the best in members or consumers' interests.
I think it would be really hard for anybody to argue that what the members need is the whole bottom line result of all their money and from wherever it comes from. And if you're only giving people a partial view, then you can't be providing the best service.
Okay.
Okay, we've got another. Thanks for that, Gareth. Appreciate that. Jonathan Watts, you've got a question. If you want to ask your question, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, the point I wanted to make really regarding that opening statement is trustees and scheme sponsors could be doing more, but it still goes back to the old problem is that they can't do it themselves because they don't have the expertise. And picking up the earlier point about, everything needs to be looked in the round. So you can't just even look at the individual pension that trustee may be responsible for. You have to look at everything in the round. So yeah, they could be doing more in terms of putting in place support, but let's be clear, they can't do it themselves because they're not going to understand or indeed know what the individual has in totality. And this feeds into one of the points about effectively about defaults at retirement as well, and and the consultation that's going on, because one of the issues around that is that it falls into the same trap. So if you imagine somebody with, let's say, 3 DC plans and one's got £10,000 in and another one's got £500,000 in, then what is the default based on? Unless you know the full picture, you're likely to come up with a very different default if you're the scheme with 10,000 versus the scheme with £500,000.
Jonathan, what's your view on what a default should look like then?
I don't think there should be defaults at retirement. I think the whole notion, so defaults work in accumulation, but the whole notion that defaults can work at retirement is just madness in my view. It's effectively guaranteeing suboptimal outcomes for the individual. The only thing that you can say in favour of it really is that it might be better than someone getting scammed because they stick with an existing provider. I mean that's as far as you can go really.
Jonathan, can I suggest an alternative? A default doesn't necessarily mean a default solution. A default could be, for example, mandating all trustees to provide access to a financial advisor. I'm being provocative again, but that's what.
I know, but that's my point. That's what I'm saying is that what they should be doing is supporting members, but they can't. But I don't see how a trustee can do it by themselves. It would have to go to a third party. That's exactly the point I'm making.
And Philip, I think the other point is, and this comes back to Gareth's point, is if the default isn't the right answer, then you need advice. But then what do you do with the people that Gareth sees probably every day who can't afford the advice? A lot of IFAs now have got minimums, 1250, 1500, 2000 before they get out of bed, minimum advisory fee. Is that fair on that individual to get perhaps a slightly better deal, but automation would help to a point?
Yeah. Can I just pick up on Jonathan's point about it being done by a third party? So one of the things we're actually quite proud of is that we do actually provide Guide as a white labeled solution for corporates and for schemes. And actually, sometimes we get in contact with a corporate and the benefits manager. When we say just like, do you know about Guide? They will say just, well, of course I do. I use it. And it's because what they do, we have no knowledge of this, is that they will actually use our consumer site and they will signpost. They'll provide our consumer site as a useful link to schemes, to their members. So wholeheartedly excited by that idea, Jonathan, that it's provided by a third party. I guess then the question is to actually prompting trustees to actually appoint a third party, which is another whole area.
Yeah. Okay. Paul Clareau, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute Paul and make your point? Challenge, agree, disagree, whatever you like.
Yeah. Yes. All of the above, I think. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Philip. So, can you hear me? Okay. Are we good on?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I love the car analogy, but and it kind of relates to what I do in terms of educational content. But I do wonder, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit on one of your principles here, whether everyone really doesn't want to be made to think. And I'll point to the evidence from Albert Bandura, who was a psychologist in the 70s, who was the first guy, I think, anyway, to discover this issue, that we don't engage in subjects because we don't feel capable about them. And I'm actually writing a piece at the moment for financial planners to use in their business if they want, which is about this very subject, which is about saying, look, you would not jump into that car and go driving, would you, without a lesson, right?
Yeah.
So you embrace the idea that you want to drive. So you go through the pain, and it is pain. It's, what Kahneman might call type 2 thinking or whatever. It's hard work, isn't it? Coordinating that left foot on the clutch and the gear stick for the first few hours.
So
right now, in all honesty, you know, those of us that have written about these subjects for a few years and done a few 100,000 words on them, we can distill these lessons into stuff that's very understandable. So it is doable to get the concepts across to clients. Yes, I know there's a proportion of the population that has an IQ of less than so and so that was never going to get anything, but that's not the point here, is it? What I'm hearing is that Guide's principle is that everyone doesn't want to be made to think, and I'm just challenging you on that to say I think a lot of people do want to think,
Sure.
and if they were made to think in an engaging way, they would engage in these questions.
Paul, totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Just as there will be some people, as we get more and more autonomous vehicles on the road and electric cars start coming in, is that there will be some people who say, I really love driving. I love pushing those pedals, and they'll stay in a manual car. So I'm being deliberately provocative. I'm not saying it's a panacea. So for those,
so it's a distribution. Everything's a distribution, isn't it?
Absolutely, but I do still feel as an industry we are disenfranchising a very, very large, significant part of the population who do want to have a lot of it just done for them, are afraid of financial advice. They're the ones we are not engaging. Yeah, and Paul, just to add a couple of very interesting points to sort of behaviours. We on our consumer side, we really go down to the level of detail of anonymously tracking what people do on the site. One of the basic premises we do see is that, and sorry, the people who come to our consumer site are generally self-directed because they've chosen to come there. The thing we do generally see is that if you, for these very bright people, if you put more than 3 things in front of them, it slows them down, it turns them off. So you end up putting blocks in them. So even if these are people who do want to think about these things, they like having their choices made simpler for them. Yeah.
So isn't the reality that they actually, if you're asking people to make decisions, they need to do so only if they've been properly informed, and that's where there's a huge gap in the fact that people are not being given the proper information on which to base decisions.
Can I? Do you mind if I come in? Sorry,
go on, Kevin.
Philip, and just sort of talk about. So I think the previous challenge was perfectly fair, and I deal with people who use our site, a lot, and I will get from some people a lot of quite in-depth questions. They want to look into the detail, they want to think about it more, and so forth. And the demographic of people who come through our site are probably on average 250. We do different kind of versions for different demographics, but for our main site, people have 250k on average pension pots. They're over 50 and they're looking towards their kind of decumulation stage. So these aren't, I mean, they are relatively wealthy people in terms of the pension assets that they have, but looking into the past, what we found, and as an actuary, I made it way too complicated when we did things first of all. But if you can put in front of people, would you like to change X? Would you like to change Y? Would you like to see the result? That, on testing with thousands of people going through it, was not what people wanted. People wanted the answer. They did not want to change 5 different variables and see what it looked like. They just wanted you to solve it for them, tell me what it is. Now, some of those people will solve it, and then they will come back and say, oh, exactly what assumption went into this, or exactly what assumption went into this. And I'll get a lot of those questions. But still, I think that 90% of the people in that particular demographic who are going through are, more than happy for somebody to give them the answer rather than them look into every single variable as to what's behind it. And that's just evidence based on users, the thousands of users that has come through that. It's not necessarily my own view. It's been shaped by what I've seen.
Okay, cheers, Kevin. Thanks for that. Just to sort of, Alan, do you want to unmute and ask your question, and Kevin and Phil could be on hand to answer?
Thanks very much. I was going to say not so much a question. It seems to be a long time ago since I put my hand up. It was going back to the sort of prime point Philip made. So I sort of agree with the first statement that trustees can and should go further, and the key problem is understanding what stops them. I was going to say, and sort of linking into Jonathan's bit, where he's saying they can't make recommendations, or you have to involve a third party. Is yes, quite likely they do, but they're even terrified to involve third parties a lot of the time, beyond the bland statement of you can go and find an IFA. But they've even stepped back from helping people find an IFA, which is quite hard on its own. So yeah, so more observation of how we address that, because we end up in silly situations. I suppose probably the biggest profile one is like British Steel, where people had a very simple choice in that there were three clear options, but nobody was prepared to refer them somewhere or help them how to make that decision, and an awful lot of bad decisions got made.
Yeah. Alan, thank you. I'm sort of like can't help being drawn into that particular case, because my view is that if the trustees had appointed a panel of IFAs that they'd actually vetted, I don't think we would have seen all the problems we saw. That's it. Very, very simple. Yeah.
No, completely agree. And I think they could have done a lot of prep work as well. I'm sure they had enough information to identify categories of people that would suit one or other option.
Yeah, and so just extend to that point, Alan, it's just like, again, the focus here has been to talk about guidance and taking that up to the boundary, but also there is a reluctance, and I'm really interested to hear views on this. There is absolutely a distinct reluctance on trustees to go the mile and actually appoint an IFA or a panel of IFAs. The majority of schemes, like 70%, I'm thinking DB now, 70% DB schemes would just say, oh, go to unbiased.co.uk, figure it out for yourself. And that's where the problems start. And as much as Money Helper tries to be helpful, it still ends up going the same way in the individual trying to actually find their way through the IFA market. So, that, again, that's Jonathan. That was my glib statement earlier on. It's just like, well, is the answer that the trustees have to be mandated to appoint an IFA or a panel of IFAs?
Okay, Phil, thanks for that. I know Sarah's on the call. Sarah Brennan's on the call, so maybe we'll give Sarah some thinking time. We'll come back to that. Don, you've had your hand up for a while. Do you want to make your point or challenge what's being said?
Have I been unmuted?
Yes, you have.
Yeah, I can hear you, Don.
Thanks very much. Love the presentation. Love what you're doing, Philip. No further comment on any of that. I just had a thought on a potential default retirement solution. Someone said, don't do it because it's going to be suboptimal. Who cares? The point of a default is not to be suboptimal. The point is that it has to be very simple to implement, and it's got to do better for the average person over there than saying, goodbye, you're on your own. And a simple default, which would work anywhere in the world, never mind the tax regime and all that, is to take it's consistent with any investment policy, take the amount you have, let's say you're making a withdrawal once a year. The amount you have on the 1st of January divided by standard mortality tables, life expectancy for this person, and that's how much you withdraw. The next year, whatever there is, you divide that by the new life expectancy because you've survived a year, etc. And the Americans actually came up with this not as an actuarial or investment solution, but as a tax device. They say that's the amount you have to pay tax on every year. They call it the required minimum distribution, or RMD. But it's just the amount of assets divided by your life expectancy. It's been actually modeled, and it turns out that it works reasonably well. It's a vast improvement on thank you, goodbye, you're on your own. It's been criticized for saying, but I want much more in the first few years when I'm in my go-go rather than slow-go or no-go stage, and it doesn't do that. And it's been criticized by others, particularly in the States, saying, I need a lot more right at the end when my healthcare expenses are not looked after by the government. But it's relatively level. It tends to start coming down by the time you reach age 95, 96, etc. But just that very simple rule is one that is a lot better than you're on your own. And I just thought it's a very simple calculation. Every country can have its own standard mortality table, or at my age, as I prefer to think of it, as a longevity table. If you wanted, you could make it a joint and loss survivor, etc. But you could have a very simple solution that says this is how much you get, and you'll never run out of money. Thank you.
Good. So Don, thank you very much for your thanks there. And so Jonathan Watts did make point is just like what you put in as a default for somebody who's just got their entire assets are like £10,000 versus $1 million could well be different. But I would concur that you can guide somebody on a path, a default path to start them. You can put in warnings and things, but that path should be live. It should be active. So just as you say, as time moves on, I think you're right. I think we can go some way to there. Sorry, just seeing somebody made the comment. Sounds like an annuity. Thank you, Paul.
Well, Billy, you've done some work in this space. Billy, I mean, I know I've got Jonathan to come back and Gareth, but Billy, while we're on this subject, do you want to mention what Don's been saying, that it works or doesn't work, or?
Oh, hello. Sorry, this turns the clock back to the days where we were talking about ending annuity compulsion. And we did a lot of work. I guess it was sort of about the year 2000, and we looked at the minimum distribution rules. And as Don said, it's for tax reasons, it ensures that people take out a sensible amount of income from their pensions. But on the question of an annuity, it's not an annuity because there's no insurance element or no underwriting. It is just a very, very simple form of drawdown, but anything that makes it easier for people is a good idea.
And so, Billy, can I just add one point to that? I mentioned earlier on about how we actually tested and we're doing some modelling around annuity, and I said that generally people took a 25%. That was like the median. What was really interesting is that for those who were coming through our site, 20% of them opted for that annuity option. These are people who would you think that generally would actually definitely go down the drawdown path, and maybe don't think of an annuity till they reach 75. Yeah. But actually, you present the options to them. There is quite a high level of interest.
Oh yes, I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, I'm very much involved in this, and I think my only sort of question on that, and I was going to ask a question at the time, is how many people go from what I call the theory into the practice. And what I find, when I speak to people are really comfortable, conceptually with the idea of buying annuities, but actually when you come to putting forward a firm proposal, there's still, a lot of resistance. So it is very difficult to put a lot of this theory into practice. And I think that's really, where you do need the skills, of an advisor, because it's not just the technical side. There's a whole lot of, behavioural things to take into account.
Yeah. Playing to my slide about financial advice, because sometimes it may be that they're playing a role of coach. Yeah, they're not there just to do the technical side of things.
I mean, I make a very important point, which plays into what you're doing, which is that the best advice is when clients have an active part to play in the advice role, but they can only get involved if they actually understand the key issues. So playing around with the modelling is terrific.
Well, again, we've got IFAs who will use Guide themselves, and they find it as a very good sort of like pre-step to advice, because it gets people to actually think about it before they have the advice conversation. So yeah, I think exactly
I
right.
wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah, very good.
Okay, Jonathan, you had your hand up. Do you want to come back on that point, Jonathan, or a point? No. Okay, Gareth, you've got your hand up as well. Go on, you make your point.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my apologies for continuing to bang on about poorer people that don't provide much by way of money to the industry or to advisors. But there are millions and millions of them with really small pots, very limited other kind of savings, probably paying rent, who are going to suffer from some of these kind of suggestions. So Don's idea about dividing the assets by life expectancy and taking it regularly would probably be worth absolutely nothing to somebody who's also entitled to means tested benefits, because it would just be deducted penny for penny. Similarly, nobody's going to point an IFA at somebody that's got £10,000 worth of pension savings. But these people depend more upon their kind of savings and the state pension than do wealthy people with other kinds of assets and home equity. And they are now, since pension freedoms, in a situation where those kind of choices can make enormous differences, small perhaps in cash terms for many people, but enormous in percentage terms to their income. And what concerns me is that those people are forgotten by the pension industry in terms of getting them the information to make the choices on.
Just on that point, I would say that I mean, I spoke about the demographics earlier of ours, but we're looking at we've actively done some work around this, but looking at other kind of demographics as well, and exactly how you mentioned what you mentioned there. So I would say, the most important thing for those individuals is not necessarily what their long-term withdrawal plan is, because they don't have the pension pots in order to do that, not what their investment plan is and so forth, or how they're going to hedge their living longer. The biggest issue for them at retirement is, and I say this not in a criticism of those individuals themselves, but because they don't understand it, but is not doing something daft at retirement, which has a knock-on effect onto something else. So we have looked at the whole situation, like you mentioned, where if somebody does what the industry advises them to do in terms of taking a long-term income from, say, a £10,000 pot, that can have a really detrimental effect on their means tested benefits, and they could end up losing that, they can end up losing those benefits for one for the extra income that they're getting. So in those situations, yes, taking £10,000 and spending it immediately or paying down some debt or so forth is a lot better route than taking £10,000 and either holding it in a savings account, which would seem more prudent, but then it's going to affect their long-term means tested benefits, or taking a drawdown of £100 a month or so for a long period, because again it's going to do that. So I do think there are different routes for different guidance depending on those different demographics, but that is something that we've been looking at specialists in that area, looking to partner with specialists in that area as well, around the whole kind of means tested benefits aspect. But yeah, it is something which is clearly an issue for a large demographic.
Yeah, appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed.
And sorry, I'll probably come back and say that, yeah, maybe there should be more help again from trustees and employers of those, in that of employees of that particular, or where they've got a large workforce in that particular demographic, to help them with those issues.
Yeah, okay. Paul Claro in the chat has said, sounds like Citizens Advice and Pension Wise need to up their game. Do we agree with that? Or do you agree with that, Gareth? Or
I think I certainly, and I've argued from the beginning of Pension Wise, that they should be prepared to actually talk real numbers with their people they're advising. They refuse actually to talk about any numbers. They only talk in generalities. And Citizens Advice, who obviously deliver the Pension Wise service, very much in that group of people I mentioned earlier, who are frightened about giving anything potentially regulated. And the real problem is that you can give people what they need, which is an individual assessment of their situation, because everybody's benefits entitlement, everybody's savings amounts are different. But you can do that. We have tools that do that very, very effectively. It's being prepared to do it is the important thing, because otherwise you offer somebody a generality and say, these are the types of products that are around. But without saying, and in your situation, you should maybe do this, this, or this, regardless of products, you're not providing people with the information to make an informed choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. Closing remarks. Kevin, do you want to do a closing remark first, and then maybe go to Philip for his closing remark? And Kevin, go for you first. What your feedback on that and the session?
Well, my feedback is it was the first time I'd seen the slides. I love an analogy, as Philip and you probably know. I come up with millions of them, so I really liked his car and driving analogy. And so, yeah, that's on the slides, but so much more. I mean, we tried. Our aim is to try and help people from, from whatever demographic. We didn't build Guide initially for a particular demographic, but just so much more can be done. From government-related entities, from sponsors, and from employers themselves. I think, from trustees and employers themselves.
Yep, agree. Philip.
Yeah, same comment on the flip side. I was hoping there would be more debate about. Sorry, I think everybody agrees with what we're putting forward. I would love to have heard more about what's stopping people doing it. That's my closing remark. Very happy if anybody contacts us afterwards to actually share their thoughts.
Yeah, if anybody wants this copy of these slides, please email me. We can get the slides to you. If you need Kevin or Philip's email address, then obviously we can give you that as well. So, very happy with that. The recording of this will be up this afternoon on the Pension Playpen website under the media tab. So really appreciate Philip's presentation, Kevin's involvement, and everybody's questions. And I hope you've all found that very, very enjoyable. And it's a really, really, really good session. Some good notes of thanks coming out on the chat as well, Philip, which is great. Thanks for joining. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we have in conversation. So Henry Tapper is going to be in conversation with an industry guru. He's got two lined up, but we're going to choose which one that it's going to be. So I hope you can join us next week for an industry guru. And as we usually say on these sessions, let's pray for peace in the East. And now we can say peace in the Middle East as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, here. So appreciate everybody's input. Quite thought-provoking. As an industry, we need to do more, and let's keep pushing the boundary and innovate. That's what I'd like to see. So cheers, Philip. Really appreciate that. If you could stay on, Philip, for a final question, that'd be great. But thanks, everybody. Really appreciated everybody joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marcin. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I thought I might leave Kevin to do the wrap up.
I think Kevin's gone.
He's gone. Yeah, he's just like, that's it.
He's off. He's off.
No,
so
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right. So I think it's just you and me now. So there we go. Yeah. So what we usually do at this part of the session is just a quick 1-minute summary of what that was about, and what what you think Guide's all about, and what you think the industry could be doing more of, and then we'll post it on LinkedIn. So it's still being recorded, by the way. So yeah. So over to you, Phil. What do you think?
Okay, so no, take one.
Take one.
So today was about challenging the so-called gap between guidance and advice. Our view is that there isn't a gap. It is possible to give personalised guidance up to the boundary with advice. I believe that trustees, scheme sponsors, and providers can be doing more. It's kind of ought to be like a moral duty to give more help to consumers and members, and not just take the literal line out of the COBS, the regulatory playbook. Okay.
Okay, really appreciate that. So yeah, a great session, and the recording will be up later. So
it was a good session. It's just like, it's still, you don't get people coming. Everybody's like in general agreement, but people aren't acting.
Nobody was challenging you with, well, what about a different way, or you're wrong, or it's not the bloody trustee.
It's just like, well, why the sponsors?
I mean, I should have brought Sarah in, and I don't know if she'd gone by then, but you had 40 people, by the way. It's a good session. Sarah Brennan's a trustee. So Sarah, put you on the spot. What the hell are you doing? What do you do? What do you think? What do you practice?
So I'm in contact with Sarah, but so I will have that follow up. Could you give me one email address out of that? Matthew Rose put something in the comments. I've no idea where he's from.
Right. Listen, are you a member of Pension Playpen?
Yes.
Right. So if you log into Pension Playpen.
Yes, yeah, I will find him.
Just hang on. Just click members. You click Rose. You type Rose in the box.
Okay.
Actually, saying that, he's not a member. But I have got a list of attendees. I've got a list of attendees, so I'll send you that.
Okay. All right. I'll check with my distribution list as well. Maybe he's somebody I already know, and I totally forgot about him. I better get on. I've got to talk to Rustin now. But,
see you later. Cheers.
Catch up with you later. Steve, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
No problem. See you later. Bye.
Bye.